Let's talk about the romance in this. Let me just start off by saying I know no one likes to be critical of the things that we enjoy, which is a bummer because I love picking apart the flaws in the media that I enjoy. I just don't always know how to articulate it very well. I love Dispatch. I don't think I could have forced myself through 3 playthroughs of it if I didn't love Dispatch. But I had issues with it. Or well, I have one issue with it, and that issue centers around the romance. So let's get into that. I feel like at this point, no one hasn't heard of Dispatch. It's a visual novel made by Ad Hoc Studio in partnership with Critical Role. Honestly, the plot isn't really the main point of this rant, so let me just give you the skinny.
Are you 100 years old? Why are you talking like that?
You play as this guy, Robert Robertson III. He's a superhero, but he's on a bit of a break due to his mech having a bit of a break. And since he doesn't have any actual powers, he's forced into one of the worst fates of them all. Taking a desk job. This desk job happens to be one where he's in charge of responding to oncoming calls and dispatching the heroes on his team based on how well their skills match up with the skills required for the job. Except he doesn't really get a group of heroes, he gets a group of ex-villains. And that's kind of the main crux of the story. Robert gets a job at SDN. While he works at this company, he's expected to help reform the villains into heroes. In the meantime, the company provides their resources to help repair his suit. I hadn't heard a damn thing about this game for a while, and then it was everywhere. But the first and most prevalent bit of information came in the form of these thumbnails. I saw very little of the game itself, as I kept telling myself I was going to play it eventually, but I did stumble upon a clip of someone in the middle of a shift at some point, and the 2 brain cells I've got left connected the idea of a visual novel and resource management, and my feet promptly started kicking in the air like I was a middle schooler thinking about their first crush. Truth be told, the final breaking point was actually a Thought Squad song I had stuck in my head from seeing it on my feed over and over again. I had the game downloaded within 24 hours of realizing that she voice acts a character and that the song was featured. That being said, my only knowledge going in was A, it was a resource management game within a visual novel, B, there was romance options, and C, I'd get to hear a Thought Squad song at some point. And the game is good. Managing your team, the character skill trees, upgrading their stats, it feels good to play. And the writing is great as well. It's well-paced, clever, and features just enough tongue-in-cheek moments for you to believe in its setting.
Yeah, chill out, Dad.
I never had a dad.
I know.
Fuck that's supposed to mean?
You told me one time you didn't have a dad.
Huh.
It achieves the hardest and simultaneously most important thing when writing fiction, making the dialogue sound believable. That this is a world that has superpowers, and within a company specializing in superhumans, some weird stuff is gonna be mundane. Like a half-bat eating rats from a Tupperware container in the break room, or the janitor vomiting water on the TV to clean it. Oh, and hacking is certainly also a mechanic featured in the game. But the romance is really not my cup of tea. At some point or other, the game expects you to choose between showing interest in Visigal or Blonde Blazer. And if you're like me, you realize in that moment, oh, these are my only choices. Because I went into the game thinking several of the characters had to make it on the list too. I mean, this is a visual novel coming out in late 2025, where games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Date Everything are still ruminating in the public consciousness. Certainly, an indie company looking for a similar player base isn't going to ignore the gaze of the girls, gays, and theys, right? I was incorrect. It wouldn't be the first time, won't be the last. Though with scenes like...
Right, make a fuego sauce and ass play sounds like a great combo.
No more hero stuff without supervision.
People don't think about much when I blow.
Orgy time?
Motherfuckers! They put me in a cage!
There's even a hair missing on Zonar's head. I'll fucking burn this shit to the ground.
Especially since I'm usually the picker, not the Peggy.
Quite the odd couple.
Couple? You aren't my typical romantic companion, but I could be persuaded.
Can you blame me for assuming the game wouldn't shy away from a little fruit? Whatever. It doesn't really matter to me what orientation the couple in question is, as long as the romance is interesting enough to be worth the time the game takes to focus on it. So let's talk about Blonde Blazer and Invisigal. Blonde Blazer is introduced to us before anyone else. She saves our ass when we get a bit too big for our powerless britches, and definitely don't forget which arm we already broke and break it more on a burglar's face. I thought it was the right arm. She's important in the company and is basically recruiting Robert since his superhero career has kind of been put on an indefinite hold. Before your first interaction with her is over, you have the option to kiss her. An option that, if, say, your partner thinks it's funny and insists you click it, will quickly devolve into an awkward dialogue because she's taken, bozo. Something that Robert definitely should know since Blazer and Phenomenon are presumably a public power couple. Whatever, he doesn't know. He fumbles the bag, and the next time you see her, she gets swept off her feet by her big, burly, oblivious boyfriend. To a date that we later find out she dumps him at because, what was it again? That was the vibe. No further explanation. Not that we as Robert are necessarily owed one, but as the player it'd be nice. No context clues to show it's coming, just the time was right. I get that we're supposed to think this has been coming for a while, and maybe the night with Robert at the bar and or even the kiss had perhaps been what made it click for her, but the wording chosen paired with the apathy towards Phenomenon, who definitely didn't see it coming, though he does seem rather dense, makes it feel random and impetuous maybe?
Well, shit.
After playing through the game a few times, I feel a little less confused about the whole breakup thing. I don't mean to imply that anyone should feel like they have to wait for the perfect moment to break up with their partner. It's safe to say that, especially with Phenomenon's extreme reaction, there would never be a perfect moment. Robert's explanation to Phenomenon is pretty much the best explanation someone could give.
I don't know, but that doesn't really concern you anymore. You can't just force your way back into her life. Blazer makes her own decisions, because that's what people do. She's her own person, and she decided she doesn't want to be with you.
There's just something about the way she conducts herself through the whole thing that feels off. Yes, Phenomenon is acting like a child who had his favorite toy taken away, but presuming, of course, that the relationship had just lost its spark, like how it sounded, and that Phenomenon didn't try and fight her on the breakup, which he makes it sound like he just accepted at the time, just didn't understand or know how to function after, I don't fully understand the lack of empathy and steadfast avoidance of him. On one hand, I understand her not wanting to interact with an ex who is acting like that, not my circus, not my monkeys and all that. Maybe there had been times in their relationship where he'd acted this childishly before. Maybe it's a huge relief to her to not have to be in the position where she feels responsible for his behavior anymore, and she's not willing to put herself back in that position to any extent again. Understandable, honestly. If you've never been in a relationship like that, it can be a little tough to swallow how much of a relief it is to just not have to care anymore. To just be able to step away and experience a little freedom and immediately get into another relationship. Wait, what? Oh, right. Later that same day as this interaction, and the same day she asks you to recruit either her sad mess of an ex or the janitor to work under you in Z Team, Blazer also decides to ask you out on a date. If you choose to have dinner with Blazer instead of showing up to the theater that Invisigal snuck into and watch a movie with her, Blazer will tell you her real name and show you her true form. Her true form, which is that she has brown hair instead of blonde. Listen, I'm not saying this joke isn't funny. I'm not saying that when I saw it the first time, I didn't roll my eyes with a half smile on my face, which is basically the equivalent of a full belly laugh for me. But that doesn't change the fact that I was expecting and was disappointed by the fact that I expected her to come out of this whole transformation sequence at least slightly less conventionally attractive. I was hoping that once all this fanfare died down, to see someone who didn't look like they just fell off a runway. I get it, that's the joke, but the following lines don't play up the humor of this moment the way they kinda need to. She did a flashy equivalent of changing wigs, and I just can't really buy this whole thing being an actual insecurity for her. I can't swallow the idea that she's ever gotten a negative reaction from simply having brown hair. It just doesn't seem to necessitate this level of worry. This scene would have struck me not as more impactful, but more humorous if she had played it up in the opposite direction. If she laughed off how serious she had made it sound because she was confident that it wasn't a big deal, or if Robert had just showed up to her hair looking like nothing had changed and she didn't say anything. It just... Let's move on to your other option for that night. Invisigal is an ex-criminal on the Z team with the rest of the cast. She believes, jarringly for anyone who's consumed, like, any bit of superhero-themed media, that her ability to turn invisible can only be viable for a life of crime. Which is like, okay, sure. Yeah, you definitely have it harder than the guy who turns into a massive bat monster anytime he gets a little too excited, or the literal half-demon. No, you're right, life really dealt you the worst hand. Wait, is her thinking supposed to be another meta joke? And if it was, I missed it. As previously stated, Invisigal turns invisible, but only when she holds her breath. She's also a smoker with asthma. Two braiding choices I found pretty clever. She's more angsty than most of the team, believing herself to be a bad fit for the job and basically writing off the chance of the Phoenix program actually helping her before she's even really tried. She's convinced herself that she's destined to be a villain and clearly wants to soften the blow of failure that she thinks is already inevitably coming. Especially when Blazer decides that the lowest performing member of the Z team was going to be cut, he goes from trying not to be last as Robert instructed all of them, to basically giving up at the end of her shift. It's in this scene where the writers lay the groundwork for her eventual crush on Robert, with Robert giving her a very cheeky, almost dry pep talk and convincing her to go after the villain she'd already failed to capture twice, leading to her apprehending him and receiving the praise of her peers. I don't have any major qualms with this scene. I wouldn't say I loved it, but at least in the dialogue options I chose, I could believe that Robert's words would encourage her to get up and try one more time. It felt a bit superficial, especially when compared to the talk that you may or may not have with Waterboy in the janitor's closet later in the game, but it doesn't feel like it has to be earth-shattering in this moment. Just that she needed a nudge in the right direction. And in this moment, I thought, yeah, she's definitely a romance option, and by the end of Chapter 3, I was thinking I'd probably like to see how that plays out. Chapter 4 opens with Invisigal getting absolutely railed. What? By Robert.
What the fuck?
In a dream. And it's the most absolutely jarring confirmation that Invisigal has a crush. This jump start to her sudden interest in Robert gave me such whiplash that it almost turned me into a prude. I'm sorry, honey, what? Who's this sad, wet, pathetic excuse of a girl, and why is she soaking her shorts after just a few nice words? Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. I think media needs to let women be pathetic messes more often. Let your female characters be feral once in a while. Let them be actual creatures. But let me be real here. Let me be critical and rude and a bit of an ass. This scene didn't need to happen. The whole chapter would have played out better if it hadn't. Honestly, I'm one of those people that roll their eyes when people whine about, like, adult cartoons swearing too much because real people don't talk like that. I feel like this whole scene was shoehorned in because boobs. But give me a few and I'll swing back around and explain why I think that. Also, all that being said, the interaction she has with Robert in the bathroom where she flat out tells him she had a wet dream about him and Robert's only reaction is...
Was it the one where I have a big dick in it?
Yeah, actually, you did.
I have that one too.
only for Waterboy to...
And you chose to be here.
Oh, sorry.
was probably one of my favorite moments in the whole game. Invisigal has a lot of moments like that throughout the game where I'd consider her lines some of the best in the game.
Don't do it. Don't fucking give that kid a cigarette.
He's the one I bummed it from. What's the address?
So I guess it should be obvious which of the two girls I chose for my first playthrough, right? I chose Blazer. I don't really know how to explain why I made this choice, but I think it's pretty obvious after I explain that at this point in the game, I didn't want a romantic subplot with either of these characters. Yes, I did generally like Invisigal more than Blonde Blazer, significantly more even, but most of the time I just kind of forgot she existed until the game put her front and center again. And my main takeaway during those moments was, the writers want me to like her. Which isn't to say I was opposed to liking her, just that I figured that it would mean that the writers were planning on giving me a reason to be emotionally invested in her at some point. Preferably before I had to make the romance-related choice. But the time between those first few interactions where I got that impression, and when you're choosing between her and Blazer, was taken up by this weird, sometimes awkward, sometimes funny, ongoing ogling session brought about by seemingly one pep talk. and a wet dream. A wet dream that we, as the viewers, bore witness to. Take that scene out, and this whole weird atmosphere may have been more interesting for the player to be a part of. The bombshell in the bathroom would have been twice as shocking, and we, just like Robert, would have retrospectively understood in that moment why she had been acting like that. These interactions would have felt less awkward and more mysterious, and we would have felt like we understood her better in this moment with this one line, rather than this weird mix of secondhand embarrassment and anticipation of something awkward occurring that, at very least, I sat up with until Robert cracks a joke about her fantasies and, oh, hey, now that you sat in fear of cringing for the better half of this chapter, it's time to choose between her and your boss. Anyways, I chose Blonde Blazer because I felt with 100% confidence that I could reject her with no real consequences. And I mean, I was kinda incorrect again. That whispered, "What the fuck," will forever reside deep within the most insecure parts of me. I didn't even want to go back for footage of it, that's how deep it cut. On my playthrough with my partner, which wasn't necessarily after I finished the game for the first time, but it was after I'd already reached this point before on my own, they decided to go to the movies with Invisigal. And it honestly did feel like the better of the two options. But that doesn't change the fact that they had no problem deciding between the two because they also just didn't care about either of them all that much. I think you always run into this risk when you introduce so few romance options into a game where you plan to have romance options. If you only have one or two, then you're more likely to have people who just don't care for those options at all, and will or would rather pick no one instead. In the instance where you only have one, at least you turning them down can result in story beats that are more centered around your character's friends or the character's individual growth. When you have two options you don't really care about, you're sometimes forced to pick the wrong choice in order to avoid a romance you don't care about, which usually just makes you feel like you're turning the character you're playing as into an asshole or an idiot. And the fact is made infinitely worse when the game punishes you for deciding to go solo. During my last playthrough, I was trying desperately to get the good ending, having found that in my first playthrough, I actually kinda got the not-so-good ending. Wait, what do you mean I failed as a mentor? What the fuck? But, stubborn as I am, if I was trying to get the good ending, I wanted to get it without romancing either character. I don't know if that made the game harder, but going into the locker room scene, I knew Vizzy was gonna try and kiss Robert, and I looked up whether or not pulling away was gonna affect if I got the good ending or not, and whether its effects end up with you in a relationship with her or not. I'm not gonna say that everyone on those posts I referenced were complaining about going no romance was making the game harder, but I saw it pop up enough times for me to get frustrated. In the end, I wasn't even prompted with kissing her in this playthrough, she just walked out. I don't know what choices I made to change this scene so drastically because she also didn't mention Blazer. But I guess that's the difference between the Everman Robert and the true hero Robert. I know what you're probably thinking at this point. Is this just a long-winded way of me whining about not getting to romance any of the other characters in this game? Am I just complaining via long-form content that I didn't get to see two dudes kissing? I can understand why you'd see it that way, but if I take the part of me that wants to screech for 3 hours about how this queer individual is starved for queer representation in media that isn't mainly focused exclusively around their gay experiences, and shove them back in the closet, I feel like there's still a solid argument to be made about this just being bad romance writing. Okay, so let's break it down. You've got 8 episodes to tell a compelling action story, develop attachments to the main cast, and justify a romance between Robert and one of these two women. Obviously, the main romantic beats can't happen right off the bat, so the first episode can't be centered on that. We need that for introduction and setup. The majority of the last episode is out as well, as there can't be romantic resolution or a big sweet moment, but the majority of that time is going to presumably be taken up by the climax of the main storyline. That leaves episodes 2 through 7 to work with, while also managing all the other story beats you want to hit. Pause. You know what other action series has 8 episodes with a primary action-focused main plot and a romantic subplot? Murder Drones. Is it unfair to compare a YouTube animated series with an indie video game? I don't think so, especially since the creators of Dispatch have already stated that they intended the game to be a show, and even if it was, I'm gonna do it anyway. Murder Drones is a series created by Glitch Productions, more recently known for producing the amazing digital Circus, and it wasn't a show I had any intentions of watching. But the looming fate of the people close to you, forcing you to watch the things that they enjoy, comes for us all eventually. And in this instance, it came in the form of my youngest brother forcing me to watch Murder Drones. Murder Drones has a sort of charm to it that I can't really explain. It's got a sort of slapstick humor that you don't really expect in a series as serious as it kinda is. It's fast-paced, which you can't really blame it for, but the romance is so perfectly spaced out in relation to the rest of the story that you can't help but hope that the two main characters confess before the final showdown. And subtle enough in the first few instances that you aren't really sure that that's even where they're going with Uzi and En. You don't even get the first inklings that En has a crush until episode 3, and it isn't confirmed until episode 7, out of 8. Compare that to Dispatch, where, if you're more perceptive than me, you might realize that Blazer likes Robert as early as episode 1, and have it confirmed in episode 4. Meanwhile, with Vizzy, you have it revealed and basically confirmed both in episode 4. Ad Hoc Studio really sped-ran their romance options in the first half of their game to the detriment of these characters. I wouldn't go so far as to say the romance is forced. If Blazer had more time to shine, not like that, then her romance probably would have felt natural. Extra points if she had already been single. I know the whole thing with Phenomenon wouldn't have really worked if she, the character in charge, hadn't dumped him, but for that matter, it kind of feels weird that most of your emotional investment is supposed to be in these characters, and then one of your romantic interests is just your boss. Romancing Blonde Blazer has the same effect in the gameplay as going solo. It makes it harder to get the good ending because you aren't all in supporting Vizzy. It's very easy to pick the right options to get the good ending when the right choice is to constantly support Vizzy. Something that, I don't know, someone who's trying to romance her would probably always do. If you're going to have the choice of romancing someone other than Vizzy be an accidental hurdle in the way of getting the good ending, why not just go all in and make the other romantic interest already a member of Z-Team? I mean, Malevola is right there. Alternatively, it would have been interesting if you could romance whichever member of the Z-Team you didn't cut. Still resulting in only 2 romance options per run, but 3 in total. I'm getting distracted. The worst part of the pacing is that it's such an easy fix. Just swap this scene with this scene. You could have still kept the first half of episode 4 the same, though I would still advise not starting it with a wet dream, or fuck it. If you insist upon it, at least don't confirm it's a dream until the bathroom scene. But more importantly, you'd go from this awkward tension with Vizzy and helping Blazer out with her ex, to bonding with the Z-Team at the bar after work. You get a few more moments with Vizzy that are at least a little more normal, while also getting to know the rest of the Z-Team better. Sure, Punch Up or Mal would still be in a mood this early in the game, and you'd have to find a better time for the housewarming party to reveal or not reveal that Robert is Mecha Man to his team, but these feel like such easy to tweak details. In this series of events, if you chose the romance route with Blazer, there would be more time for it to feel less like she's hitting the rebound. Meanwhile, if you chose Vizzy, you wouldn't have the aftertaste of these awkward interactions still lingering. You'd have better memories of working with her to think on, and your sort of movie theater date would have flowed better into the housewarming party and the subsequent fallout in the next episode. There, I fixed it for you. Back on topic. If you asked me up till the night where you have to pick between the two of them who I would have rather had Robert spend that night with, I probably would have said either Mal or Sonar. Or both. It would have been a lot more complicated from a game-making perspective to let you romance the whole roster of characters, I'm sure. And my main complaint isn't that you can't romance everyone. Personally, I don't need a game to let me romance the sentient pile of sludge in order to feel good about my playthrough. But I do really hate a wasted romantic subplot. And that's what it feels like. Every playthrough felt like I was forcing myself through these interactions to finish the game. Especially since there was no skip or fast-forward option for the dialogue. Dramatical murder, you were ahead of your time in exactly one way. You can't expect every player to be interested in one of these two. You can't expect every player to want to see an honestly pretty generic feeling guy gets grilled for the 50 billionth time. Especially when those girls are hardly your most interesting characters. Even just one more option would have made a huge difference in how the game plays. It could have been one of your other characters. I literally would have been happy with anyone else. Except maybe the Dirt Man. Sue me. Or you could have been hanging out with everyone, or having to make the choice between a date and investigating something. Meeting up with someone with intel about Shroud, or spending more time working on the Mecha Man suit, where we get to learn more about Robert and his family. Or save one of those tidbits about Roy till then. Hell, you could have just taken B for a long-ass walk. I guess what I'm trying to say, and what this whole video has been getting at, is we should have gone on a date with Flambe. Robert and Flambe have crazy Toxic X energy. They have all the setup for enemies to lovers. Flambe is one of the funniest characters in the game and gives you so much material with him and Robert to work with. Flambe is a musclehead, full of himself, quick to anger, and a dick. If Flambe has one fan, it's himself. And if he has no fans, he must be dead. But he's also a dork. He fumbles his insults and finishes them anyway. He stumbles over his words, but he never loses confidence in what he's saying. He's performative, but you can tell he believes in his own performance. Him and Robert have chemistry. This hot mess is 2 good pep talks and 1 hard drink away from crumbling into Robert's arms like a massive sad sack of eyebrowless potatoes. He sang a parody of a song just to make fun of Robert's dick. But this man is obsessive. He's pathetic. He wants Robert so bad, it makes him look sad. You made it. This is the end of the video. Thank you for watching it all the way through. It is far longer than it probably should be. I don't know how to condense my words at all. I write and then it becomes like 5 paragraphs and it's just the intro. So, thanks. I don't really know if many people are gonna see this. I don't know if I'm gonna care if nobody sees it. I mainly just made this to challenge myself. I made it to challenge myself and because I have strong opinions about this game. I haven't really made anything quite like this in a long time. I mean, I've never made anything like this at all, but I haven't really made anything for YouTube in a very long time. And this is new, but I had some free time on my hands and I wanted to see if I could do it, even though I've never touched DaVinci Resolve before in my life. Bit of a learning curve, but it hasn't been too bad. Hey, look at that. That's the drawings I did for this. I think that's what I'm adding here. I think I'm putting a speed paint of me drawing the assets for this. I'm honestly surprised it didn't take me very long to finish them. I honestly don't know how many more I'm gonna make for it. But yeah. Thanks again for watching. Drop a like, I guess, so that I can feel good about this choice. And subscribe, because I might do this again. I would say I do like to hear the sound of my own voice, but that's not true. I just like speaking. I like saying things. Sometimes those things make sense. Anyways, Happy New Year, and I hope you have a good one. Bye.